Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. Today, in the hot seat with me is Peter Breen. Peter Breen is a former colleague of mine. He's a neighbor here in Wheaton as well. He's a very accomplished man. We're going to talk about a really important topic, and that is the Dobbs decision and everything surrounding Dobbs and what has come out from that decision, including the activists that have shown up their ugly heads, actually, their ugly antics in front of your boss's home in Evanston, Tom Brecka, who's basically runs the Thomas More Society. So a little bit more about Peter, though. Peter earned his Bachelor of Engineering in Electrical Engineering from Vanderbilt University. He completed that program in just 3 years. He earned a Juris Doctorate, he's a lawyer, from the University of Notre Dame. And he's also a member of the Father Becker Council of the Knights of Columbus and an Eagle Scout. He and his wife, Margie, have 2 young children. They live in Wheaton. They've been married for 14 years. More importantly, though, Peter and I served together in the Illinois State House. He was our Republican floor leader, did a great job defending good conservative policies against Democrat hysteria. And he did it with, a lot of gravitas, which I appreciated, because a lot of the issues there were contentious, but you had a very great demeanor in dealing with some of the most difficult policy issues of our time. One of them, of course, is abortion, and that's going to be the topic that we discuss today because, Peter, let's get started with this. You are David Daleiden's lawyer, and David Daleiden is the man who basically did a lot of undercover reporting on Planned Parenthood and is now being sued in the state of California. Can you just give us a brief update about where that case stands?
Sure, and David was sued both civilly and criminally. So Kamala Harris, when she was Attorney General of California, went in there with search warrants. She was meeting with Planned Parenthood executives at the same time. We understand it to be planning all of this against David. Then Javier Becerra, who's now our Secretary of Health and Human Services, came in after that, filed the charges. They've pressed them even now. They've got a new Attorney General now. We're on our third one, Rob Bonta in California. But they are charging David with illegal undercover taping. Now, California is a two-party consent state like Illinois is, but when you tape out in public, you are supposed to be able to do that. So David taped in California when he taped. It was only in public locations. Still, he is being charged for this. We've put to the judge, we've moved to dismiss for selective prosecution. When you look at the evening news in Los Angeles, say, every week, there is an undercover investigation that was taken in a much more private setting than anything David ever contemplated. But are you seeing prosecutions of reporters, mainstream reporters in California? Of course not. Mm-hmm. So it's only because David was going after their lead political opponent, Planned Parenthood, big political donor and backer in California. And so, if you can imagine, we're filing these motions with the judge. One of them is a video snapshot of Javier Becerra on the night he won the Democratic primary for Attorney General, standing in front of a Planned Parenthood banner. They paid for his victory night party, the victory party on that election night.
No conflict of interest there, right?
Not at all, as he's prosecuting Daleiden for what Daleiden allegedly did to Planned Parenthood. So that's where we are. But we're in San Francisco. Should we get a not guilty? Absolutely. But we're in the worst jurisdiction in the country for someone who is pro-life or conservative in a politically charged case. So we are working on that. We still have not got a trial date.
And it's been taking years, right? What year are we on with this?
Right. So he released his videos starting in 2015. The prosecution side didn't go till 2016, but still that's 6 years now that we have been working on this. I will say we are hitting every point, and so we've been vigorously litigating this just because it is so obscene to have this affront to the First Amendment. Because actually, and then on our civil cases, we've got those on appeal in the federal system. One of the groups that has supported us on appeal was PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And for the reason being, they finally picked up on what we've been trying to argue, which is, I don't care what your pet issue is, if you can't do undercover journalism, there are a lot of times you're never going to get to the truth of things. So, for instance, if you're on the left and you've got say a very pro-agriculture attorney general or something,
sure,
and you're in Iowa, and you want to expose, say they're mistreating some of the farm animals. No one should be for that. But the only way to get the information out is they go in and they get jobs and they take video. And actually, in every setting, much more private than anything David Daleiden ever did. And David Daleiden never went and got a job, trying to do something he wasn't qualified to do. But you're sitting there, and so
he had conversations with people in restaurants, for heaven's sakes. If they didn't want to answer the questions, they didn't have to answer the questions. They obviously didn't know who they were talking to.
Well, think about it this way.
Think about that.
Right. Well, and what was he doing? He was pretending to be the vice president of a tissue procurement business. So wanting to give money to the abortion clinics in exchange for their fetal tissue. So he is a vendor to you. He's trying to sell you a service and pay you for a particular, it's gruesome. You have to kind of accept fetal body parts and organs, horrible. The whole practice needs to be shut down, which was the point of David going in to see what was going on. But you don't have your deepest secret conversations with a vendor, a business person, this random person who comes up and sees you at the exhibit hall at an abortion conference. You have a business lunch with the person. These are not intimate moments.
And yet the things that they revealed on that tape were gruesome and in many cases illegal.
Well, this was the incredible thing. Back in 2015, that first video that David released was it was with Dr. Deborah Nucatola, who was and the interesting thing, as David was doing his investigation, I find out, how did you do this, David, and how did you figure out? He had a couple different places he was looking to go. But one reason for him, it was so key, when he got connected to Dr. Nucatola, she was the senior medical director for Planned Parenthood National. So if Deb Nucatola said something, that meant the whole of the national Planned Parenthood organization believed it. And that's why that first video featured her. And they're sitting there over wine and salad, and she is talking about changing abortion procedures. So this is supposed to be a medical procedure done for the benefit of the patient. Changing that procedure to get better fetal parts. Oh, I can get them intact. And those are more valuable. It's a disgusting, that we're even talking about economics in relation to human life. But, this is part of what David's videos helped to bring forward. I would say this too. When you look at public polling, after the videos, it changed the public perception of abortion in this country. And that change has actually persisted to the present day. So it wasn't just a temporary change. There was a permanent change in a segment of the population that really had not been, these weren't the hardcore pro-lifers, but kind of the middle folks who said they think of Planned Parenthood differently, they think of abortion differently. And so David's work, I would say David's work even helped to contribute to the environment that we needed, that pro-life environment we needed to give the Supreme Court the room to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Well, that's where I wanted to get to. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think that a lot of people have changed their minds on this, even in the state of Illinois, which is fairly blue right now and has passed some of the most extreme abortion laws. So they've elected people who have passed these laws. They seem to be okay with those people because they've elected them again as well. So 2019, they passed an extreme abortion law. A lot of those legislators come back and they get elected again in 2020. So it appears that they like the abortion laws, but actually most people don't know what's in that abortion law. And the state, even the state of Illinois, the 66% of the residents, when polled, they want abortion limited to the first trimester. Well, the Dobbs decision was about a 15-week abortion ban coming out of Mississippi. And we're talking about most people want the first trimester. So I don't think that we're that far apart as a society on some wanting restrictions on abortion. Two things about the Dobbs decision. One, are you surprised? And number two, given the environment we now have after the Dobbs decision has been made, will that be reflected at all in your cases going forward with David Daleiden?
Well, so was I surprised? It was funny. So we got the draft decision 2 months before, early May. It was leaked, and the date on it was February. And so it was a February decision leaked 3 months later in May. And then shortly thereafter, then the court confirms that is an actual draft. It looked like a real draft. It had all the stuff in it that you'd expect. But then, we're at that point, we're dealing with anonymous sources. And they said, well, no, that's the actual operative draft. And we're sitting there. We don't want to get our hopes up. Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the initial vote was 5-4 to overturn Roe. Justice Kennedy then flipped during the deliberation process. So we knew from history, you really don't want to count your chickens till they're hatched on this one. And so, as much as we should have been expecting it, it was still surprising to actually, get up that morning, go downtown. Decision comes in, and it tracks the draft decision almost exactly. And then, of course, there's concurrences and dissents and what have you. But it was really something. We had. I have to tell you, I think the other side was surprised. As much as everyone expected it, I think we were all really surprised. Look, our entire lives, or at least our entire adult lives, this has been the law. Roe has been the law.
Yes.
Abortion has only been about the woman, and the child in the womb is treated, as a clump of cells, or at best a potential future maybe life. And now all of a sudden, we have the U.S. Supreme Court saying abortion involves two human beings. And that was foundational to their decision, because they wanted to try not to touch gay marriage and all the other things that were a bit of a distraction from the abortion issue and Roe v. Wade. And so part of their decision was, hey, abortion's unique because there are two human beings here. And so, in their way of distinguishing all those other decisions, they actually laid this very strong principle that I think folks still have not internalized. It's only been a few weeks now, but I think that's going to have a huge impact going forward, that the Supreme Court has said abortion involves two human beings.
So a couple things here. Yeah. First, in the wake of the decision, you've seen the left just go hysterical. And in fact, your own leader of Thomas More Society just recently had 40 to 50 protesters outside his home, and they vandalized his home, and they put up quite a fight, and the police were there. And he was warned ahead of time, apparently, that this was going to happen, so he was not at home at the time. But, come on, really? You guys are running a non-for-profit legal firm. Sure, you deal with pro-life issues and but you deal with a lot of other issues, from protecting religious schools and from everything like that, right? Is this where we've come to? Evanston, who pretends to be so sophisticated, has this type of antics going on over a Supreme Court decision that Tom Brecka had literally no control over.
Right.
This is how ridiculous.
We did file 3 briefs in the Supreme Court. We actually had 3 amicus briefs.
Well, that's good. You did work it good. That's great.
But I have to tell you, the other side has been vandalizing. So we've seen this, vandalizing pregnancy centers, churches, whether Catholic or more conservative Christian churches. And this is the first time they've now started to go to people's homes. And it remains to be seen if they're going to keep this up. But I got to tell you, when an organization, so for pro-lifers, when you're having a protest, you usually want to be in the middle of the day, because you want people to see it, and you want to maybe reach out, change hearts and minds, hand out flyers, what have you. You're praying rosaries, or you're doing prayers, whatever. This group specifically organized after dark, required everyone to wear those black Antifa masks, and then made no issue. They did not disclaim violence. In fact, the comments on the Twitter account for this organization were that those folks that had marched on the Dobbs Day, that had been downtown and protesting for abortion, that they didn't do enough, that it was pointless. And so
they wanted to
they
really
set this up for lawlessness.
They did.
Now Evanston police had, as I understand it, maybe 6 squad cars there, so they knew what was coming, but apparently did not intervene with the crowd until after they had done vandalize the home. So paint bombs, spray painted the sidewalk with horrible obscenities, things that you can't speak about in polite company, dug up the rose bush even. And so, that sort of behavior you look at and go, what is this? And I understand, I always want to be supportive of our friends in law enforcement who, they've notified us of these things as best they can, and we're hoping. We haven't seen the Department of Justice do anything to anyone who has vandalized a pro-life pregnancy center or a church as of yet, and I think we're up to about 40 acts of vandalism and pretty serious ones. Fire bombings at some cases.
That's right, up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin, New York. Plenty of our clients have been getting this. Northeastern Ohio now has been hit, along with many other places. And so I am wondering, local police here, all been great. I would hope, so this is, but you see the pictures of the protesters marching by the Supreme Court justices' homes.
Yes.
There are U.S. Marshals lining that front yard.
Yes.
That was not what happened here. They stayed in their squad cars until these guys started doing stuff. And I would imagine next time this happens, we will, that's not going to be good enough. Now that we know what they're up to, we had a pretty good sense. I'm certainly, if anybody else around the country, any of our other pro-life leaders has this similar circumstance, we're going to, respectfully.
But what's wrong with them? They're literally
the
protesting in a state where it's abortion on demand at any time, taxpayer funded. Actually, you had Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton up in Congress yesterday asking for federal resources so that they can provide for travel expenses for women who will come across the border into Illinois to seek an abortion. That's where they are. You can get an abortion anytime you want in Illinois. It's shameful. It's awful. But Planned Parenthood planned on this happening. That's why they've put 3 new clinics up in the last 5 years. Right. Flossmoor, 10 miles away from Indiana. Waukegan, just miles away from the Wisconsin border. And then, of course, the large one down in Metro East area, just across the border from St. Louis.
And the Rockford abortionist has announced he's coming back.
Oh.
So his clinic was shut down for health code violations.
Great.
Health code violations, including reusing medical instruments that he did not sterilize in between patients. So we're talking, they go inside the woman. But
in Illinois, it's he must have got caught because in Illinois, abortion clinics are not inspected.
Well, it was after Kermit Gosnell.
Oh.
We finally got Pat Quinn got someone in his administration to order an inspection of the abortion clinics.
Okay.
And it had been, I believe, 15 years at that time. So this was maybe 2013 or so, or 2012, 2013. And they found violations in Peoria, Rockford, Lincolnwood, and there were another few. Actually, north side of Chicago had a late-term abortion clinic. They finally, it shuttered finally, but Rockford also shuttered. And I don't think, I think the other ones, they might have reopened, but it was certainly under different circumstances. But they drove the abortion clinic out of Rockford. So Rockford's been abortion-free for nearly a decade. But that abortionist, the same guy that got cited, is coming back and wants to now abort children from Madison, Wisconsin, so that western Wisconsin, southwestern Wisconsin area. But J.B. Pritzker said he's calling the legislature into special session.
Yes.
The list of potential things they want to look at are taxpayer funding, not for abortion, but for abortion clinics. I'm hearing about plans of mobile abortion clinics. So you literally set those up at the border. How we might drive over in Indiana to buy fireworks. They come over, get into a trailer, and have an abortion, and then go back or get their pills.
It's remarkable.
Horrific.
There's 6 different things that they wanted to consider. I don't have that in front of me now.
How about it was essentially anyone with a nursing degree doing an abortion?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, they wanted that legislation that the morning after pill gets put into a vending machine outside at college campuses, and you can only charge $40. Then the other one is they want to make sure that you can have abortifacients just be sent through the mail, so there's going to be no concern about the patient's health, the mother's health. So it's just, these people it's gruesome what's going to happen. And and then of course in that 2019 law they passed that legislation that said that even in the event that a woman dies in the middle of an abortion, the coroner will not be called.
Right.
So there'll be no documentation of the horrors that they are doing.
Yeah. And we know, in this state, we've had women dying from abortions. And in just horrific, multi-hour bleeding out circumstances. Look, we have a real uphill fight here because, as you had alluded to, The polls, which have been done recently, show
Yes.
the people of Illinois are not radical on abortion. This isn't New York. This is not California. But for whatever reason, we've continued to elect people that do not reflect the wishes of the people on that issue.
Well, that's part of the reason that we're doing what we're doing here at Breakthrough Ideas. We're a 501c4. I can speak about this freely. And the part of it is connecting the dots on policy, politics, and the politicians who are imposing those policies so that people have a better understanding when they go to the polls to vote.
Sure.
I mean, they need to understand what they're voting for. And so many times that you get a knock at the door and she seemed like a nice person. Yeah, but she just said she wants to impose sex education on your kindergarten, or she wants, extreme abortion laws. She raised her own pay at the same time that you were going through, unemployment from the pandemic. She voted for the largest budget in the history of the state of Illinois when we're having out-migration. I mean, it could be a variety of policy issues, and you know these because you and I fought those same sorts of Democrat heavy-handed policies that were unreasonable together in the state houses. And it just isn't just abortion. It's just like the whole set of policies coming out of from these people is outrageous.
I'll tell you, in the recent polling I've seen on this issue, an insight that I thought was maybe people have been overlooking is that roughly 70 or 80% of people said that the position of their elected officials on abortion specifically was either very important or somewhat important. We're talking 70 or 80% said that. And yet when I go to, in meetings with, conservative groups and maybe more on the political side, less on the pro-life side, I keep hearing, well, don't talk about abortion. We don't want to get into it, whatever. Well, if 70 or 80% of your people say that's an important issue to them, a couple points. One, they want to know what your position is, but number two, it's safe to discuss because they are interested. And so that's the thing. Right. I'm like, if you're not discussing and the other side's discussing, they will assume the worst about you, assume the best about them, and you're missing an issue that everyone tells you is important.
That's right, especially when coupled with the fact that over 2/3 of Illinoisans want abortion limited to the first trimester. A very, very, very small percentage says abortion on demand anytime taxpayer funded. And additionally, over 72% of Illinoisans say, I'm a parent. I have the right to know if my minor child is seeking an abortion, period.
Right.
72. That's a 70% issue. And yet the Democrats in the state of Illinois repealed parental notification of abortion just last fall.
Sure. And that these are
they're
some
out of
issues.
touch.
Right. Absolutely. And we're going to see what benefit, say, more pro-life candidates get from the national political environment, which is going to be friendlier for pro-life this time. I know the other side, the other side is pushing the abortion narrative very hard. I mean, you're seeing it on TV ads right now from Governor Pritzker. And I still, until proven otherwise to me, I go by the theory that they are pushing these ads to try to gin up their base because their base is very much depressed.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you cannot be happy when you get, we got on the day we're filming, get over a 9% CPI print.
Oh, no.
And that's 9%. A year ago, it was a 5%, which means you're 14% higher for every single thing you buy from 2 years ago.
That's right. To the listening audience, we are taping this on July 13th today, and the CPI just came out for the latest month, and it's 9%. So it's 9% inflation rate. You cannot make that up, and the Democrats have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. So, and they know their base is deflated. And if you can't turn out your base, then you can't win an election. And so they're trying to turn out their base on this issue. And I just don't think it's going to work for them.
Well, but I would say this, and we're doing interviews with the national media on this issue of life.
Okay.
And so I am a little bit concerned that some of the pro-life politicians and pro-life other leaders that might be able to push a little harder are hanging back. Whereas the other side is pushing out narrative after narrative after narrative. I mean, they will try things until they just run out of steam. And so I do think it is a time to be pushing back. I mean, you might sit there and go, well, you just won the greatest victory in the history of the pro-life movement. You've been 50 years, and you're hanging back? Like, no, this is everyone knows. When you're winning, press the advantage. But we're getting a little bit of a sense that I'm worried about, that we're letting the other side dictate the terms of this debate, and we should be pressing hard.
Yes, we should be pressing hard because there's even more difficult, more policies that are coming out of the Biden administration that are just nonsensical. So, for example, we're going to facilitate an abortion somehow, some way, by having some sort of floating boat off the coast of South Carolina, or having a military reservations or federal lands turned into sites for abortions in conservative states. I mean, is this even constitutional? What's going to happen here with this?
I got to tell you, we are for the next few years.
Okay.
We are going to have some very interesting. If you're the lawyer in this space, you're going to love it. Everybody else, you're going to sit there going, I don't exactly know what you guys are talking about, but okay, I guess it's interesting. But we are going to be fighting hard. I think what Biden, if you read, he came out with his executive order, very nonspecific. It was a total downer because he didn't actually order anybody to really do anything. So just it was all talk. But the reason it's all talk is you start reviewing federal statute. Federal statute is mostly pro-life. And the Hyde Amendment and other restrictions on spending for abortion are pretty good. They're not perfect, and we need to tighten them up when we take control. The pro-life side takes control of the Congress again, and hopefully the presidency at the same time. But he doesn't have a lot he can do. And but what we're seeing in the states, so we've just started at Thomas More Society a legislative initiative to use the fact that I'm in the legislature. I have another colleague, or I have the legislative experience. We have another colleague who is a member of the Missouri State House right now.
Okay.
We've got plenty of folks that worked on ledge staff in the states before they came to work for us, maybe before they went to law school. And so we're bringing that experience in to try to help state legislators through this environment where public officials are refusing to enforce their abortion laws. Well, you've got to have civil enforcement. Do private attorney general enforcement like we do in fraud cases or environmental cases or consumer protection cases. You can do private enforcement. The other is, and we had talked about this, the finding of the Supreme Court that abortion involves two human beings means when somebody comes out and says, well, a state can't stop a person from going across state lines to get a medical procedure, that's not the question. Because of course a state can't stop you from going to get a medical procedure. But can a state protect its children from being taken across state lines to be abused and killed? Absolutely. And that insight, I've got to tell you, I've been trying, as just in these last few weeks from Dobbs. I understand everybody, it's a new footing. I understand the abortion guys not understanding that point. But I'm telling it to pro-lifers, and they're going, hadn't really thought of it that way. I'm like, well, of course not. It's been 50 years. We've been stuck in this other way of thinking. But all these abortion laws in these states are child protection laws, and we can. Because we're expecting
a good 20 to 30,000 more abortions to come in from out of state in the state of Illinois. I believe the figure last year was about 10,000 abortions were done with out of state women coming across to get an abortion here. Yeah. And
they want to take it from 40 or 50 up to 70, 80. That's their expectation.
And you're paying for it. You're paying for it, taxpayers, because there's a presumption of eligibility for Medicaid if you walk in poor and you're pregnant.
Well, you give them an in-state address where you happen to be staying.
Absolutely. Yep.
But so my message. So if you can imagine, as an Illinoisan, I am particularly offended by that. The quotes from J.B. Pritzker are what we take to our neighboring state legislators, because we're in touch with them. Tell them, this is what JB has in mind for you and your state. And, trying to just driving in Wisconsin with Illinois plates is bad enough.
Right.
Imagine, now face up to a Wisconsin legislator and say, here's what JB wants to do. How do you want to react? And so our challenge is to get to the place where states say, look, we are going to protect all of our unborn residents with the same child protective laws we'd use if they were born. And so that is a place where we are at Thomas More. We had not seen any other pro-life group really pushing hard on it. So we've started to push hard on it using our legal expertise, legislative experience, and bring that in so that folks in, Indiana's going to go into special session in a few weeks. The legislators in Indiana shouldn't just be content to say, well, we're not going to have abortion on this side of the state line. But if they want to drive 50 miles or 100 miles, however far away they are, we can go, all of the Indiana babies will be aborted over there. That's not good enough. Because, look, pro-life laws are going to save babies no matter what. But let's say you save 10% or 20%. I want to save 100. So every unborn Indiana resident deserves to be protected from being aborted, no matter where in the country that might occur. Same thing for Missouri and Kentucky, Iowa, Wisconsin. And I think we can do it, and we're giving people models to be able to do it.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
that's where, I mean, think of what I hope to see 5 or 10 years down the line is a country where the abortion rate has been cut in half or more. And we know some of the most, one of the strongest reasons for individuals to be very pro-choice on abortion is that they had a personal experience with it. They themselves, they took someone, they had a personal experience. If fewer and fewer people are having personal experiences with abortion, that means fewer and fewer hardened pro-choice advocates, which means we're going to be able to shrink this until hopefully we can end it again. As it was prohibited through most of American history, hopefully we're going to get to that day soon.
Well, that's terrific. On that note, we're going to end our interview with Peter Breen. Peter, thank you so much for joining me on The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. Very insightful discussion. I really appreciate your work. Go and do the best job you can and defend David Daleiden, and let's win that case. If people want to donate to Thomas More Society, where can they go?
Well, it's thomasmoresociety.org, and more is with one O, thomasmoresociety.org.
Okay, terrific. Great. Thanks again for joining me on The Real Story.